President Franklin Pierce and Nathaniel Hawthorne, author of The Scarlet Letter, formed a friendship in college that lasted all of their life, even when their devotion to each other caused controversy. I'm Bob Summers, and this is a presidential story. Nathaniel Hawthorne didn't really want to go to college, but his uncle, Robert Manning, insisted. Manning even paid for it. So in 1821, Hawthorne made his way to Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine. At a stage stop in Portland, Maine, Hawthorne met Franklin Pierce, who was also on his way to Bowdoin. This is the moment their lifelong friendship began, and it continued to grow over the next 4 years they were in college. As Pierce's legal career flourished, Hawthorne started to find some writing success. Around 1828, Hawthorne's first novel, Fanshawe, was published. Although anonymously, Hawthorne wasn't sure it was good enough to put his name on it. In 1837, Hawthorne finally achieved some literary notoriety with the publication of Twice Told Tales, a collection of 18 short stories. Even though it sold well and was well received, Hawthorne did not earn much money from it. To pay the bills, he had hoped for more stable work, like an editor job, but that never materialized. Now a U.S. Senator, Pierce knew his friend was struggling financially. He tried to get Hawthorne a federal job as a historian on a South Sea expedition authorized by Congress. Through no fault of Pierce's, the job never materialized, but Pierce kept trying. In 1844, Pierce was campaigning for his friend from Congress, James K. Polk. Polk's dark horse candidacy was a success, and Polk landed in the White House. With Polk as president, Pierce was able to secure Hawthorne a position as surveyor for the Customs Collection District of Salem and Beverly in Massachusetts. The job paid a stable $1,200 annually, or about $50,000 today. It didn't make him rich, but it provided some financial security for Hawthorne, his wife, and 2, soon-to-be 3 children. The job also provided Hawthorne time to write, which led to a remarkable run of successes, starting with The Scarlet Letter in 1850, followed by The House of the Seven Gables in 1851, and The Blithedale Romance in early 1852. Hawthorne was now considered one of the great American writers. Also in 1852, Pierce decided to run for president. Pierce's political career was quickly on the rise, maybe because he was the son of a Revolutionary War hero and former governor of New Hampshire. However, his accomplishments in Congress and the Senate were undistinguished. At the 1852 Democratic Convention in Baltimore, there were 4 major candidates vying for the nomination, and Pierce was not one of them. And yet, no one could secure the win, so on the 49th ballot, a compromise was reached, handing the nomination to Franklin Pierce. Dating back to Andrew Jackson's political emergence in the 1820s, campaign biographies had been a regular feature of presidential politics. Hawthorne immediately volunteered to write Pierce's necessary biography, even though this was beneath his talents and prestige. As one contemporary reviewer noted, "There are hacks enough in every city who would be right and well fitted to perform such filthy work." Hawthorne had a tall order writing the life of Franklin Pierce. One reviewer called it a venal homage to ambitious mediocrity. Hawthorne's own brother-in-law, the famous education reformer Horace Mann, claimed that if he makes Pierce out to be either a great or a brave man, then it will be the greatest work of fiction he ever wrote. In addition to his undistinguished political career, Pierce served as a brigadier general during the Mexican-American War, primarily based on his political stature and connections. Pierce's opponent, General Winfield Scott, had an impressive military record. Pierce's record, not so much. In his brigade's first engagement, his horse spooked at the sound of artillery fire and began bucking and rearing wildly. A strong kick of the back legs sent Pierce lurching forward into an awkward and blindingly painful pelvic encounter with the pommel of his saddle. Pierce fainted and fell to the ground, only to have his horse fall on his knee. A subordinate allegedly called him a damn coward when he didn't get up. Unable to walk or ride, Pierce's superiors ordered him to withdraw from action. He gallantly insisted on staying on the field, which he did until the next day, when he fainted again after wrenching his bad knee marching across marshy terrain. Pierce's political opponents later seized upon this story by nicknaming him Fainting Frank. These were the life details Hawthorne had to work with. As Hawthorne admitted to a friend after finishing the book, though the story is true, yet it took a romancer to do it. According to Hawthorne, the gist of the matter is to explain how Pierce remains so obscure in spite of such extraordinary opportunities for eminent distinction. Hawthorne's answer was to emphasize Pierce's growth and development, which he claimed, using the very confusing phrase, has always been the opposite of premature. I think he's saying his growth was slow and delayed. As a lawyer, Hawthorne mentioned Pierce did not give promise for distinguished success, yet he eventually became adequate. In Congress, Hawthorne noted that Pierce rendered unobtrusive, though not unimportant, services to the public. In battle, Hawthorne noted that Pierce's fainting spell came within full range of enemy fire. I guess if one were to faint, that would be the valiant way to do it. Hawthorne's greatest challenge was to thread the needle around the Northerner Pierce's sympathies for Southern views on slavery. This balance of Northern and Southern views was what earned Pierce the nomination in the first place. Any indication that Pierce's sympathies did not lie with the preservation of slavery would cause the party's Southern wing to bolt and potentially open a path to victory for Scott. At the same time, emphasizing Pierce's status as a Northerner with Southern sympathies threatened to push anti-slavery Democrats towards the splinter Free Soil Party, fracturing the Democratic Party in the North. Hawthorne's solution was to emphasize Pierce's long-standing desire to preserve the Union as more important than the issue of slavery. According to Hawthorne, Pierce's view looks upon slavery as one of those evils which divine providence did not leave to be remedied by human contrivance, one that would eventually vanish like a dream. Hawthorne advocated that it was better to stick with Pierce and the Union and let a higher power take care of the rest. To mixed reviews, the biography sold 13,000 copies, but the reviews of his fellow New England writers were particularly negative. The fact he wrote a political biography was bad enough, but his defense of someone trying to preserve slavery made it far worse. This was the same year, 1852, that saw the huge success of Harriet Beecher Stowe's anti-slavery novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Hawthorne was on the wrong side of sentiment within the literary community. In a letter to a friend, Hawthorne admitted that the biography has cost me hundreds of friends here at the North in consequence of what I say on the slavery question. He added, Pierce owes me something. When Pierce won in an electoral landslide, 254 to 42, Pierce did indeed help his old friend. Hawthorne was appointed as the U.S. Consul in Liverpool, England, one of the world's busiest ports. The job provided a huge financial benefit, a cut of American shipping that went through the port totaling about $30,000 to $40,000 per year, or about $1.2 to $1.6 million annually today. However, Hawthorne's diplomatic duties made it difficult to find time to write. His next book, The Marble Faun, was not published until 7 years later. In the intervening years, Pierce left office after one term. The Hawthornes traveled through France and Italy, and the Civil War began. In December 1863, Pierce's wife Jane died from tuberculosis. Hawthorne was at his side when Jane was laid to rest despite his own health problems. Pierce was grieving the loss of his wife, but also worried about Hawthorne's physical condition. At Jane's gravesite, Pierce took the time to adjust Hawthorne's collar for him to keep him warm in the cold December wind of New Hampshire. In the spring of 1864, Hawthorne's health continued to decline. Chronic stomach pain continued to plague him, but he hoped that a carriage tour of the White Mountains would be good for his health. He asked Pierce to join him. Hawthorne's wife, Sophia, warned Pierce of how ill his friend was. She wrote to Pierce, he really needs to be aided in getting in and out of carriages, because his eyes are so affected by his weakness, and his steps are so uncertain. She continued, I would not trust him in any hands now, excepting just such gentle and tender hands as yours. After meeting Hawthorne in Boston, the two friends traveled to Pierce's home in Concord to wait for the weather to improve before beginning their journey into New Hampshire's White Mountains. Hawthorne was gaunt, weak, and clearly dying, but in good spirits as they traveled from Pierce's home to Dixville Notch in northern New Hampshire. On May 18, 1864, Pierce and Hawthorne arrived at the first-class Pemigewasset House Hotel in Plymouth, New Hampshire, about 100 miles from Dixville Notch. In the evening, Hawthorne had a bit of food and a cup of tea, fell asleep for an hour on the couch, and then woke up and retired to his room. Pierce described the next few hours in a letter to Sidney Webster in 1868. Passing from his room to my own, leaving the door open, and so placing the lamp that its direct rays would not fall upon him, and yet enable me to see distinctly from my bed, I betook myself to rest too, a little after 10 o'clock. But I awoke before 12, and noticed that he was lying in a perfectly natural position, like a child, with his right hand under his cheek. That noble brow and face struck me as more grand-serenely calm then than ever before. With new hope that such undisturbed repose might bring back fresh vigor, I fell asleep again. But he was so very restless the night previous that I was surprised and startled when I noticed, at 3 o'clock, that his position was identically the same as when I observed him between 11 and 12. Hastening softly to his bedside, I could not perceive that he breathed. Although no change had come over his features, I seized his wrist and found no pulse. Ran my hands down upon his bare side, but the great, generous, brave heart beat no more. Earlier in the day, on their way to the hotel, Hawthorne asked Pierce if he had read William Makepeace Thackeray's account of death, and remarked in a low, soliloquizing tone what a boon it would be if, when life draws to its close, one could pass away without a struggle. Closing his letter to Webster describing Hawthorne's final hours, Pierce wrote, "The boon of which he spoke in the afternoon had, before morning's dawn, been graciously granted to him. He had passed from natural sleep to that from which there is no earthly waking, without the slightest of struggle, evidently without moving a muscle." As Hawthorne wrote in the Blithedale Romance, "Happy the man that has such a friend beside him when he comes to die." Thanks for watching.